to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at Connor Kent Superboy, the next figure from the McFarlane Collector's Edition figures. Now, in all honesty, ever since we received our first images of this one, not been a big fan or even really been anticipating taking a look at this one. Now, I do feel like it is what it is. This is the figure that they gave us. I do have a lot of problems with them. I tried very hard to look at the silver lining of this figure, but it was definitely hard to get anything that I really enjoyed out of this one. I mean, in the end, it is, yes, one more character, one more version of Superboy to add to our McFarlane DC multiverse. But there's just a lot of problems that I did have with this figure. It's like that old saying that a wise man once said, you can't polish a turd. Now, one thing about me, I know you might not, really know this, and that is that I'm not a big user of uncouth language. That means I don't really curse a lot. I think I'm working on about 2 years that I definitely stopped cussing or using bad language, foul language. Now, this is not really a religious thing or anything like that. It was more sort of a test or like just to prove to myself that I could have some sort of self control. So, I mean, it's not a big thing, but that's why a lot of times you'll hear me use like, words that aren't too brutal or hard. And that's because they're just not words that I use a lot in my life. I'm not going to say I'm perfect or that I never think about, bad words or, in fact, a lot of things that I enjoy or things that make me laugh do have a lot of cuss words and stuff, and that's just the way it is. But I just choose not to use them in my, in my day-to-day language. But anyways, getting back to this figure, I mean, it makes me think a lot about that because there's just this very little pleasure or things that I enjoyed about reviewing this figure. I mean, what really makes it bad is that this is one of my favorite characters in the DC universe. This is a figure that I really should be wanting for McFarlane to do, but in the end, the execution was subpar. Now, he does look pretty freaky in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his Datafall card. On the front, you do have an image from the source material from the comics. And this is more of what I was looking for when I was expecting this figure. I had heard rumors of him way before. And this is, what I envision more as Connor Kent Superboy. Now, he does have a pretty good history in the DC Universe comics lore. I mean, he's not one of the more famous or more used characters or versions of Superboy. Did come out like in the animated series. But the main thing that I really enjoy about him is his, attitude problem, even if it is a little one, because that kind of reflects, a little bit of me. Now on the back, you do have some information. Pretty cool. We'll hold on to that. He also does come with a clear McFarlane flight stand. Now, I don't really use these. I have tons of these in a box, but I will hold on to this. You never know when you could use these. Future, they are pretty, sturdy and good flight stand for what they are. He does also come with some alternate hands. He has an alternate pointy finger. And for some weird reason, a left grasping hand when there's not really anything for him to hold, but you never know. You could pose him holding some kryptonite or some other accessory for figure photography. So we will hold on to both of these. Now, he also does come with some alternate heads. Now, for a long time, people have been wanting McFarlane to put alternate heads with the figures. I have also come along to the thinking that this is a good thing for figures to come with alternate heads. But the thing being that I must display all of the heads, so I ended up having to buy multiples of this figure. That way I could have a body to display each head sculpt. Now, besides the standard regular head that he comes with, you also get an angry head. This is by far my favorite head sculpt that came in the pack. And you also get this alternate bald heat vision, not really, more like crackling energy coming out of the eyes, like he's about to throw some heat vision. So it's another cool one. We'll hold on to that. Now, that does align with the platinum version being a completely different form of Connor Kent, where he like burns a L into his chest and kind of revives his ties with Lex Luthor, but we'll look at that later on. He also does come with this crater. Now, this looks like a crater like in the middle of the street or wherever it could be. Pretty simple. It does have some pegs for you to peg the feet in. Surprisingly, it does have another peg in the bottom. You never know what you could use that for. Now, you can use this with other characters. It doesn't necessarily have to be used with him. And since I bought three of these, now I have three of these little, accessories for displays. So that's pretty cool. We'll hold on to that. Now, surprisingly, there was not a black stand that usually come with these collector's edition. There was a rumor going around at the Comic Con that McFarlane said that he was going to move away from those black stands, those card holders, and going to add more accessories and display pieces for the new figures coming out in the future. So that's a pretty cool positive sign for McFarlane. Moving away from those tired card stands that I do believe, a lot of people did not really enjoy. Okay? But anyways, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this guy. Now, I have to say off the bat, not a big fan of this figure. Right away, I could tell, even from the promo pictures that we received, I kind of knew I was not going to like this because this is not the vision that I have in my mind for Connor Kent. Now, I did talk about this before when we did the reveal for this figure, when I talked about it, how I didn't think it was really matching up with a comic accurate version of Connor Kent. Now, there has been some people that say it looks kind of like the actor that plays him, like on one of those DC shows. And I could see that because even the body and the sculpt and the design has a little bit more of like a live action feel to it, more than what I'm used to from the animated version of Connor Kent and from the comic books. Now, I'm a big fan of the S shield. That's like one of my favorite shields from all of the Supermen that are out there. Really love that cool design and with the jeans and just make it like a simple down to earth fit. Really keeps him grounded. And I just always liked that about Connor Kent. Also, the way he has, that chip on his shoulder, kind of a bad attitude. uh, so yeah, always identified with this version of Superboy, but this figure is definitely leaving a lot to be desired, at least for me. Now we do know that this was reused from the McFarlane figure that was released. Not completely, there is slight changes, but they definitely used most of that body, and that's pretty much where the downfall is of this figure. They should have just, did the old school action figure company tactic, was just get a regular body and just slap on the paint. You don't even have to sculpt the details of the t-shirt and give it a more muscular looking figure. But this is what they went with. This is what we get. Just not really happy with this. But for the most part, it is, supposed to represent a Connor Kent Superboy. Now let's take a look at the head sculpt. Not a big fan of this just plain head sculpt. I don't know what it is. I did, while reviewing this, I did come to find out that I am a bigger fan of the angry head sculpt. That one, a little bit more my speed. But this plain sort of milk toast head sculpt, really not a fan of it. Doesn't really resemble any of the previously released Superboys. It's its own, sculpt, but I'm just not feeling it. Just not what I think about in my mind when I think about Connor Kent. Check out the articulation. That's another thing. Really stiff figure. Doesn't have, we've gotten accustomed to getting a little bit more articulated figures. Now McFarlane went through that phase where there was minimal articulation. Now he's gotten to where he's adding a lot more. And this is, for me, just a regression, taking it back to being a stiff figure with minimal articulation. I mean, the points are there, but just some of the range and the stiffness really, takes points away from this figure. So he can look down pretty good, but looking up is going to be a no-go. Really stiff, really tight. They just didn't leave enough room in that head sculpt to allow it to move around the neck peg a lot. Can't really look up. You do have right to left. Of course, you could tilt his head for some attitude. But yeah, not a big fan of this, normal head sculpt. But it is what it is. This is the standard release of the figure. Going down once again, that red S shield I really love. I just wish it was on a different body book. The midsection is really bad. The way it has, they wanted to give it like a t-shirt, like a cloth feel to it. But for a superhero that probably wears a skin tight shirt, it just does not fit with the character. And then going down into those almost dad jeans, I would say, that really bad. It does not fit with this character. Check out the waist articulation. You do have good waist articulation side to side, the full tilt-a-whirl, lower waist swivel, upper chest swivel. You could twist them, get him in some basic poses. He can lean back as well, pretty good. But yeah, no forward crunch to speak of. I mean, it's really tight. You could get a little bit out of it, but it is very minimal. Now, you can mod these to get a little bit more, but even doing that, I don't think you're going to get a lot out of this one. Go ahead and take a look at the shoulder. He does have that socket and bushy shoulder joint. Got a lot of movement and range in the shoulder, some up and down, some front to back, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows. Doesn't look too bad, looks pretty good. Straighten them out, moving down into the wrist. You have that wrist that you really need to know how to position it to give it a clean look. Into a fist, but you do have the four ways of articulation from McFarlane. On the other side, you do have the same thing down into a fist. Now, one cool thing is the hands are really easy to pop in and out. You can pop out that fist and get the pointing finger in there. Now, this gives you a lot more options in displaying him. This really works with the angry head. That's basically probably the best hand gesture for that angry head sculpt. So, I mean, it is cool to have different options, but yeah, just not a big fan of this head sculpt. Another thing, too, is you can lean his shoulders back just to give him a little bit more of a broader chest, but you still don't really get any kind of muscular feel to him. He just looks like a regular, punk kid in, in a red Superman shirt. So I think even I look more intimidating than he does. But you can get him in T-pose pretty nicely. Arms above the head, moving down. Don't really like that belt buckle that they chose for him. In all the source material, he usually has a really nice, thick buckle, not just this regular belt strap. So yeah, not a fan of that as well. He does have thigh swivel. I mean, you can move them around, of course. You can heat these up and get a lot more range. Kicks up pretty nicely, kicks back as well. The trunks are made of rubber, so you can push the leg back and flex it. Do not be afraid. When you put it back, it goes back to its original shape. Cock out the leg. You do have that McFarlane. Hip swivel, double jointed knees. Now, these knees look pretty terrible. It's pretty ugly. Don't like that at all. I mean, I do get it. They're trying to make a cloth look like it has flexibility, and the way they cut it is just, not appealing at all. You got up and down at the ankle, right to left, rocker, and of course toe articulation. Now, before we go, let's take a complete look at that pretty horrendous lower body. Another thing I'm not a big fan of is the legs. They are pretty slim. Superboy does not skip leg day, and this figure has some pretty thin legs. Now, that goes back to reusing the buck from the McFarlane figure. Just not a big fan of the silhouette that this figure cuts. Just a leaner, scrawny punk look. It just not a fan of it. I mean, if you didn't know any better and you're just a random customer, you just see a Superboy figure and that's fine. But for someone like me, that this character really means something to me, yeah, not not a big fan of the look. And another thing is the boots. Now, we do know that a lot of the times Connor Kent Superboy, he wears sort of like combat boots or more high-tech style boots, like military style boots. And these, reused from the McFarlane figure, are more like some sort of Charleston boots, like designer boots. They do have a buckle on them, but yeah, they're not what I usually think of when I think of the boots that Superboy uses, especially not the Connor Kent version. Take a look at him from the bottom. No tread, but he does have some identifying marks. Moving up the back, a lot of the wrinkles and folds for the jeans. Now, this is the real tragedy of this figure, and that is, look at the butt that they gave him. I mean, that is very unflattering. Not just the cut of the way they did the trunks, but they didn't give him any kind of bulk or anything. It just looks like a flat, dad butt. So this is definitely taken from the McFarlane figure. I mean, I don't want to shame it or anything like that. It's not my fault that I was blessed with rugged good looks, a firm, muscular backside. I just don't really connect with this that they gave him here. It's really not flattering at all. But yeah, going into the back, I mean, just a plain sculpt, the back of the head. I mean, that's all. That's it. I mean, like I said, it is a version of a Superboy. It's nothing spectacular. You can kind of fudge them around to get them a pretty nice look, but definitely not one of my favorite figures in the DC line. I have shown these before. This is my DC Direct Superboy. This is more of what like I expect when I think of Connor Kent Superboy. This kind of, basically is how I dress, out in the streets. So that's, what I was thinking when they announced Connor Kent. You do have the other Signature Series one where they just painted the t-shirt onto the muscular buck, which is not, a big crime for any action figure company. While the pants and the boots kind of match the look they were going for, the upper body is just not even in the same ballpark. Now, the small things that I did enjoy, one of them was the angry head sculpt. This is my, alternate version of him with the angry head sculpt. This one, a lot more fun to pose around when you get him in fighting stances. He does work a little bit more for figure photography. That angry head does give him a lot more options. Now, another thing I did with this one is I did give it a quick repaint of the pants so that they wouldn't look so lifeless. I gave them a quick wash, added some highlights, added some shadows. This did kind of make him a little bit more fun, even with the two fists or with the pointing hand, this one was a little bit more fun to play around with. Just because of the quick little touch up in the paint, kind of helped it out a little, but it's still nothing spectacular. Now, I did also pick up the platinum version. Now, this one is different in a couple of ways because the pant color is different. It's a lighter blue. You have the L that he burned onto his chest in the comics, and you have a very different alternate head, no hair, and a little bit of sort of crackling heat energy coming out of those eyes. I also gave him an alternate hand from one of the earlier Superboy releases from McFarlane, which gave him more of a gesturing hand, which I think really works with this one. Now, this one works really good in like floating poses or flying poses. That's the feel that I get from him a little bit more. While the angry face is more for battling stances. I even did get a chance to use a crater hole and pose him in that and get a little bit of figure photography. Now that brings us into the other custom head that I made. I made a custom head using the angry head and that crackling heat energy coming out from one of the bald heads. Now, this is one of the benefits of getting all of these accessories, getting all of these extras. I ended up having to buy 3, and that works because now I have a lot more material, fodder to do custom work. You can pop this custom heat vision head, and that really works. I really like that. So I did think of how I was going to do this. I thought I was going to drill some holes, heat up the head, and pop out those plugs and put them in, but it didn't work out that way. I ended up just cutting them, and I painted the eyes on this head sculpt. I added some red with a little point of yellow. That way, when I glued the effect on it, you could kind of see that through the translucent plastic. You could see the little yellow dot and the red paint just to match it a little bit more. So I thought that was a pretty cool look. So yeah, this is probably gonna be my favorite thing that came out of this is this alternate head and that angry head sculpt. Do a little bit of customizing on him, but I kind of feel like this is definitely one of the lower points in my collecting McFarlane's DC Multiverse. Just not a big fan of the way they went with this one. It is what it is. I mean, it's released. I can't go back on it, but I really wish they would have consulted with somebody and they told them like that is definitely not going to make the fans happy. That is not what Connor Kent Superboy represents. But it is what it is. We take the good with the bad. That's why I always say collect what you like, stay away from anything that's not for you. But as always, keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.